The Hispaniola is beached, and Jim has his shoulder in a bloody bandage. The stockade is 3 miles away through a dark jungle, and he can hear Silver's pirates in the trees behind him. This is Compass and Codex. Never stop exploring unknown worlds. And now, Treasure Island, a classic adaptation. From Book 2, The Island. Chapter 14. The Pill Bug Colony. Scene 1. At dawn, the world looked clean, as if everything had been burned out and rebuilt in the blue-white. Cinder led the way, slow and low, keeping the dew on his back to mask his scent. Blaze followed, silent as a shadow, and Thistle trailed, not out of fear, but because she was tracing lines on the earth with every step, keeping pace with the pattern in her head. The mounds looked harmless at first, just lumps of mud, soft and sagged from the last rain, nothing any ant would fear. But Thistle saw it first, the way the rim of each mound was edged with pebbles, each pebble perfectly spaced, every lip of earth curving in the exact same spiral. They made it to the first ridge without drawing notice. Cinder pressed himself flat behind a dried leaf, peering through the slit between 2 stalks. A dozen pill bugs marched in single file below, each one identical except for the streak of blue-grey on their shells. Every bug shoved a perfect sphere of mud, rolling it along a channel cut in the earth. The spheres glittered here and there, bits of seed, slivers of berry, even flecks of gold pollen, all jammed together in the core. Thistle crowded in, her side tight against Cinder's, and Blaze braced over both of them, his arms anchoring the 3 in a wedge against the dirt. It was the only way to fit, all 3 bodies jammed in the shallow trench, legs tangled. Cinder watched as the line of pill bugs peeled off at the next mound, each one vanishing into a notch at the base. Above, 2 more pill bugs stood guard, antennae swiveling in perfect sync. When the last bug dropped its mud ball into the entrance, both guards snapped to attention, then dropped after it in sequence, like the ticks of a clock. Thistle pressed her mouth to Cinder's ear. "They're running a supply line, fast as they can." Cinder nodded, then looked up at the next ridge. Here, the mounds grew larger, stacked in offset rows. Between the mounds, a scaffold of grass stalks, lashed with silk, created a tiered platform, a stage, but for whom? He found out in the next 10 seconds. A single pill bug rolled down the center channel. This one was nearly twice as big as the others. Its shell glinted with a metallic blue, and a scar, long, white, and ugly, scored its side. It uncurled at the platform, rising up on 3 sets of legs, and surveyed the whole mess. Thane Reed. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking him. The arrogance, the way he held his shell, the crisp order in every movement of his lieutenants. Cinder felt his gut twist. Thane scanned the platform, then gave a flick of his antennae. Instantly, a new column of pill bugs started up the ramp, each carrying a double load. The efficiency was terrifying. Blaze whistled under his breath, too low for anyone else to hear, then started tapping his fingers against his own arm, counting. At every 3rd tap, his lips twitched in time. Thistle scratched a rough diagram into the dirt beside her. "Tunnel, here. Staging, here. See those blue marks? That's how they track units. If I'm right, there's a 2nd line underground." Cinder grinned. "You're always right." She smirked back, then kept sketching, her mind racing. "I make at least 12 surface routes, but look at the rate they're pulling in new mud. They're running 3 shifts, minimum." Below, the air was thick with the clack and thud of mud balls hitting stone. The pill bugs never stopped, never broke rhythm. They just loaded and vanished, reappearing at perfect intervals. Blaze leaned in, his bulk threatening to crush Thistle. "I count at least 300, Sin, maybe more, and I think there's another column behind that ridge." Cinder swallowed. The Fire Ant Kingdom had never managed more than 200 fighters in a single unit. This was bigger, tighter, meaner. Thane Reed took to the highest platform, unfurled himself to full height, and addressed the lines. His voice didn't carry, but the way the pillbugs snapped to attention made it clear. Orders had been given. A squad peeled off, splitting left, rolling their cargo down a sloped ramp and into a waiting tunnel. The guards at the next mound shifted formation, 2 taking post at the tunnel mouth, 2 vanishing below. Thistle finished her sketch, then started a new one, layering in extra marks for every tunnel entrance and likely storage vault. Cinder checked the sun. They had maybe an hour before the surface traffic thinned, before the day's load was buried underground, and the real planning began. Blaze, not even winded, started counting again, this time using pebbles. If they keep this up, they'll fill the mounds in under a day. Whatever they're prepping for, it's coming fast. The detail that stopped Cinder was a spiral ramp behind the main mound. Here, the pillbugs had built a massive dome, like a miniature fortress, capped with clay and reinforced by sticks. At the base, a huge plug of hardened mud blocked the entrance, but Cinder could see the faint glint of light inside. He pointed. Thistle followed his line, then her eyes widened. That's not storage. That's where they're keeping the best haul, or the queen. Cinder nodded. Or both. They huddled closer, the trench now so tight that every breath felt like a conspiracy. Blaze, finally done counting, muttered, "We can't take that head on." Thistle's hand trembled, but she kept drawing. "No, but if we get a map and the right moment, we can blow the operation, or at least cut their numbers." Cinder watched Thane Reed. The bug never rested, never even paused to eat or clean himself. He just directed, split, and coordinated, every order relayed with brutal precision. The cold wind picked up, carrying the scent of crushed berry and damp clay. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Blaze said what they were all thinking. "We need more than just us. We need the whole kingdom. And maybe every other ant on the border." Cinder watched the operation, the endless line of pillbugs, the shivering mountain of stolen food, and for the first time in days, he felt small, but not hopeless. He leaned into the huddle, eyes locked on Thane Reed, and whispered, "We bring back the map. We bring back every detail. Then we take it all apart, piece by piece." Thistle finished her sketch, then tore the page in half. One for her, one for the queen. Blaze flexed his hands, ready for anything. They crouched in the dirt, bodies mashed together, and waited for their moment to break away. Below, the pillbugs marched on, perfect and relentless. Cinder's heart thumped in time. This was what war looked like, and he'd never let them win without a fight. Scene 2. The pillbug runners arrived in silence, each one trailing a ghost of mud and dust behind them. They converged on the base of the main mound, unspooling from the horizon in perfect intervals, like clock gears ratcheting into place. Cinder barely dared breathe. Thistle had pressed the 3 of them even deeper into their hiding crack. The pressure of Blaze's shoulder was enough to nearly pop Cinder's ribs, but it was better than getting spotted. Each runner made a quick circle at the base of the dome, then flicked their antennae in a code Cinder couldn't decipher. Thane Reed's lieutenants relayed the signal up the grass scaffold, passing the message with a snap of their jaws or a single thud of the tail. In seconds, Thane stood at full height, front legs spread, the gleam on his shell catching the first gold streaks of sunlight. A hush fell across the mounds. Even the guard bugs paused in their rounds. Thane's voice cut through the quiet. "Report." The lead runner dropped his mud ball and uncurled, bowing low. "Caterpillar Ridge is clear. Wasps dormant. All bins on the southern edge emptied, 0 resistance. New colony detected at the margin. Small, but with 2 stores." Thane nodded. "Mark for second wave. Next." A thinner pillbug rolled forward. Beetle outpost east is starved. They dug tunnels to nowhere. Patrols are doubled but blind at night. We can finish the breach by dusk. Next. A third. Fire Ant Kingdom shut all surface routes at dawn. Tunnel scouts are thicker, but food bins left exposed. Colony expects raid, but not today. Thane's mandibles flexed, the gesture ugly and pleased at once. Send word to the inner ring. We advance schedule. Stage 2 begins tonight. Cinder felt a spike of acid in his stomach. Next to him, Thistle's pencil snapped in half, the sound lost under the thud of pillbug runners lining up for their next assignment. Thane looked down over his rows and grinned. You all know your worth. This, he gestured at the mountain of mudballs behind him, is the largest single acquisition in pillbug history. By sunup tomorrow, we will have enough to last not only the winter but the season after. The old rules are gone. This meadow is ours, and no one else eats unless we say so. Blaze's breath shivered out, the barest exhale, but Thistle crushed his hand before he made another sound. Thane's eyes swept the perimeter. There are still spies, scouts, those who would run back to warn the others. We can't have that. Increase the outer patrols, double guard on every tunnel mouth. No insect escapes. Not until the final phase is complete. As he spoke, a pair of pillbugs rolled a new prize out from under the dome, a fragment of honeycomb, slick with sugar and lined with dead bee larvae. Thane addressed the chunk, then rolled it back down to the base, where it vanished into a waiting side channel. But what caught Cinder wasn't the food. It was the depression just past the guard line, a shallow bowl lined with hardened mud. At the bottom, a tangle of limbs and shells, prisoners, not just pillbugs, but beetle, caterpillar, ant, even a crippled wasp. At the edge, 2 red shapes pressed side by side, fire ants. Cinder blinked. The first was Harper Blackwood, battered but alive, face set in a snarl. The second, smaller, with one antenna half missing. Dovey, Cinder mouthed, and nearly lost his grip on the trench wall. It was Dovey, his own crew, left for dead last cycle after a patrol gone wrong. She was alive. Both of them were, but barely. Blaze saw it too, and nearly stood, but Thistle yanked him down so hard his chin struck the dirt. She shook her head, eyes bright and unblinking. Cinder forced his own heart back into rhythm. He didn't know what Thane's plan was, not really, but if it included cages for prisoners and doubled guards, it meant war. The runners split into teams, each assigned a quadrant. Thane's lieutenants barked orders, then snapped the squads into movement, east, south, north, west. One runner peeled off toward the pit, carrying a blue flag, a signal maybe, or a warning to the prisoners. Devi noticed. She dragged herself up, hands gripping the edge of the bowl, and stared right at Cinder. For an instant he thought she'd spotted him, but her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Harper was worse. He was awake, but just barely, head lolling. Even the famous Blackwood stubbornness looked thin now. Cinder wanted to move. He wanted to sprint out, crack the shell of every pillbug in the pit, and get his friends clear, but Blaze had a grip on his arm like a vice. Thistle pressed her foot over Cinder's shin and didn't let up. They'd seen enough. There would be no more surface runs without getting caught. Above, Thane Reed surveyed his domain, arms crossed, perfectly still. He turned his head just slightly, toward the crack where Cinder, Blaze, and Thistle watched. The crack was small, hidden, but for a second Cinder swore Thane looked straight through the dirt, straight through them. He fought the urge to blink. He just stared back, waiting for the moment to pass. And it did. But the message was clear. They weren't the only predators in the meadow. The new patrols started at once. The outer lines moved tighter, the guards doubled, the air alive with the hiss and clack of pillbug armor. Thistle finished her map, hands shaking so hard she almost tore the leaf. Blaze started counting again, but this time it was the seconds left before they'd be discovered. Cinder's mind ran wild. The fire ant kingdom was next. By sundown, maybe all the food would be gone, and if he didn't get the map back, didn't warn the others, it would all be for nothing. He watched Dovey slump down into the mud, Harper's arm around her. He watched Thane read, the unbreakable shell, directing it all like a general. He dug his hands into the dirt, set his jaw, and waited for the next move. It would have to be perfect, or none of them would make it out. The sun was up now, the sky a harsh white. Every second counted. Cinder made them matter. Hey, a quick note before we get back to the story. Our ebooks are now on Amazon. In Book 1 of Colony in Danger, the colony is starving. The queen won't say why. And the young fire ant sorting seeds is the only one asking the right questions. In Book 1 of the Lego fan fiction series, Brickhaven, he built an entire town out of bricks. Then he woke up as a minifig, but his own creations have now turned on. And in Book 1 of Eagle's Edge, farm boy Marcus took the Roman oath at 16. He had joined Caesar's army and must prepare to be part of the world's greatest military machine. But by sundown he was certain he had made a terrible mistake. If you want the full adventure without the weekly wait, grab your copy on Amazon now. Find the link in the show description. Go check them out. Okay, back to the story. Scene 3. The pebble was nothing smaller than the bead on a grain of pollen. Blaze didn't see it until it rolled under his elbow, and by then his weight had pressed it to the lip of the crack. One twitch, and the pebble popped out, skittered down the slope and smacked off a stone below. The sound was tiny. A click, a pause, then another click as it found the next ledge. But in the morning hush, it sounded like a shot. Every antenna on every nearby pill bug snapped to attention. Cinder felt Thistle's claws slice into his arm. Blaze held his breath so long his face started to darken. Below, a guard bug froze mid-stride, antennae scanning the trench, then pointed straight toward them. Cinder counted the seconds. 1, 2. The guard edged closer, moving with an odd, slow confidence. Its shell glimmered, not blue, but a muddy black, and a double row of white dots tracked the rim. It sniffed, then braced against the wall and started climbing the slope with slow, sure steps. They couldn't move, not yet. To bolt now would be to throw themselves straight into the waiting arms of the outer patrol. Thistle pressed tighter, her breath gone entirely. Blaze's body tensed, ready to spring. The guard reached the rim of the crack. It paused, one leg dangling into the gap, and peered in. The angle was wrong. The bug would see nothing but blackness. Maybe the faint outline of the leaf Cinder had wrapped around his own shell. But if the guard was even a little smarter than average, he'd know. It waited. Cinder counted again, 6, 7. The guard cocked its head, then drew back, moving off in a slow arc, as if satisfied. Cinder dared a breath. Thistle's grip didn't loosen. Blaze shook once, shivering the dirt, but kept still. Then the guard came back, this time with a second pill bug. Both braced at the rim. The first one gestured, a twitch of the antennae, and the second produced a thin strand of sticky web, probably stolen from the spider runs. It lowered the thread into the crack, fishing for trouble. Cinder saw the plan instantly. If the web caught anything, the guard would yank it up, expose their hiding place, and raise the alarm. There was no time left. He whispered, "On 3, up and out." Thistle nodded. Blaze flexed, the muscles in his legs bunching. The web dipped closer, almost touching Cinder's head. 1, Cinder mouthed. The web brushed his shoulder. 2. It hooked for an instant, then slipped free. 3. They exploded up and out, a snarl of arms and legs, knocking the guard bugs off the rim. Blaze grabbed Thistle by the waist and tossed her clear of the slope. Cinder followed, using her as a ladder. The guard bugs reeled, one tumbling back down the crack, the other whipping the web in a circle, trying to ensnare them. Cinder rolled left, then bolted for the ridge. Thistle was already moving, sprinting low, her pack of sketches clutched to her chest. Blaze took the rear, barreling over the guard's head, then flipping it with a single brutal kick. But the alarm went up anyway. The guard bug started clicking, a sharp staccato burst, and within seconds the whole surface force echoed it back. The line of mud balls froze. All eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands, turned toward the fleeing ants. Thane Reed stood tall on the scaffold, arms raised. He snapped out a command. Instantly, 2 full squads peeled off, rolling in formation to intercept. Cinder saw them split, one group angling to cut off the escape, the other chasing in a direct line. He pointed. "Left, through the dandelion roots. They'll expect us on the ridge." Thistle changed course without hesitation, tacking a zigzag through the patch of yellow weed. Blaze kept pace, but even he was breathing hard now. The surface between them and the next ridge was flat and slick, nothing to hide behind. Worse, the pillbug squads were gaining, rolling fast, building up speed, and already starting to close the gap. Cinder forced himself to keep running. His shell felt like lead, every limb burning. Thistle's hair was a blur in the wind. Blaze's feet hit the ground like hammers. They made the dandelion patch just as the first squad arrived. The pillbugs tried to follow, but the roots were too thick, too close for their wide shells. They bottlenecked, flailing at the edges. Cinder leapt the last root, slid through a gap, and found himself in a sudden drop, an old vole tunnel soft with dry leaves. Thistle tumbled in after, nearly bowling him over. Blaze dropped in last, plugging the entrance with his own body. For a second, it was quiet. Then the pillbugs started ramming the entrance, each hit sending a shower of dust down onto Cinder's head. Blaze grunted, holding the wall. "Can't hold forever." Thistle fished a scrap from her pack, then snapped, "This way. There's a secondary exit. We take it, we lose them." Cinder didn't ask how she knew. He just followed, hands grabbing at the dirt, lungs burning. The tunnel twisted, then narrowed. Cinder heard the pillbugs trying to dig, but the roots held. For a minute it was just crawling, hands, knees, stomach pressed to the earth, face full of dark and the stink of old grass. Then the tunnel widened, and they burst out the far side into the light. They didn't stop. They ran, away from the mounds, across the scar of open meadow, past a half-drowned wasp nest and a dead chunk of log. Behind them, the alarm clicks faded, replaced by the distant, furious sound of Thane Reed bellowing for more searchers. When Cinder finally slowed, it was only because his body wouldn't go faster. Thistle was beside him, shaking with the aftershock, her maps gripped so tight her hands bled. Blaze walked behind, every step deliberate, head on a swivel. They were alive. They'd seen the plan, the scale, the prisoners. They'd nearly died for the privilege. But they were alive. Cinder looked at the horizon. The fire ant kingdom was too far for one day's walk, but he knew the tunnels. He'd be there by nightfall if he didn't quit. He thought of Harper and Dovey, stuck in a mud-lined cage, of Thane Reed, the military monster, ready to starve out the world, of all the other colonies who didn't even know they were doomed. He drew a ragged breath, felt the weight of the world in his chest, and said, "We warn everyone, not just our queen. The beetles, the wasps, even the caterpillars. Nobody survives this alone." Blaze nodded, finally grinning. United front. They'll never see it coming. Thistle wiped her face, then started drawing again, mapping every path, every shortcut, every edge. They ran. Behind them, the pillbug mounds swarmed, every tunnel a boiling mass of armor and legs. But Cinder didn't look back. He ran toward the future, heart full of terror and hope, the memory of the stolen food burning behind his eyes. And with every step, he knew this was only the beginning. They had a war to win, and this time the world was watching. Thanks for listening to Treasure Island. New chapters drop every Wednesday, and the map, Book 1 of Treasure Island, is now available on Amazon. If you liked Treasure Island, listen to Eagle's Edge on Thursdays. A 16-year-old Roman recruit takes the oath, marches into Gaul with Caesar, and learns what war actually is. Back to Treasure Island. Now, Jim beached the pirates' ship where they'd never find it, then set out through 3 miles of dark jungle, wounded and feverish, 1 foot in front of the other, because his friends were counting on him. When every step hurts and no one is watching, what makes you keep walking? In Chapter 15, Jim finally reaches the stockade in the dark and finds something he was not expecting inside the walls. This is Reed Sterling. Thank you for listening to Compass and Codex. Never stop exploring unknown worlds.